think everyone is on mute. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar. Our apologies for the delay with some technical difficulties. We will bring up our slides shortly and begin our webinar. Thank you for joining us.
Can I hear, wait a minute, can the staff hear?
I think, was that Oscar?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you, Oscar.
Oh, okay. But the attendees can't hear us at the moment, can they?
They should be able to, yes.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, can you tell me if you can see our presentation at all? Anyone?
I cannot. This is Susan.
You cannot?
I can see
Presentation. I can just see the panelists.
I see.
I can see the CNHED slide.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the CNHED logo and the panelists only.
Okay. One moment. Okay, and what are you seeing currently?
We got your first slide. We can see.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. We'll go ahead and begin. Thank you all. Welcome to CNHED's event on Homelessness Prevention Program, Rental Application Information webinar. My name is Precious Rideout with CNHED. We are joined by CNHED members, Housing Counseling Service, and we have an incredible panel and discussion set forth for you today. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I will begin the presentation. Let's see. Just some virtual housekeeping here. This is a Zoom webinar, so your video is turned off for all non-panelists, and you're also muted, as you can see. You'll also be muted for the entire webinar. For questions and answers, we ask that you use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions. This will help the moderator and panelists as they will see your questions and hopefully answer them throughout today's program. Thirdly, you may also see an icon about raising your hands. Although you see that, we ask that you please don't use this due to the large capacity of today's webinar. We'll be taking questions only through the Q&A box, just to help funnel logistically your questions and have them answered in our presentation. And finally, if you are experiencing any technical problems, feel free to reach out to me, Precious Rideout, at prideout@cnhed.org. And you should also know that today's webinar is also being recorded. And with that, I will turn it over to our guests.
Good morning, everybody. We're really pleased to be here to give you the nuts and bolts aspect of 7 rental assistance programs that we have under our roof. The goal of today's meetings really came out of a discussion with CNHED member property owners, where we were discussing the concern that tenants are not applying or completing their applications in rental assistance in a manner that allows us to make payments, and the stress that's placing on property owners who have to maintain these properties. And with that discussion, we came up with the idea of engaging management companies, property owners, and other individual and organizations that work with tenants in developing a partnership with tenants in their application process and enticing tenants not only to start their application, but more importantly, to complete their application. The goal, as I said, of today's webinar then is to give the participants the knowledge and the skills to become part of that partnership and to support fast payments for these programs. First, a little bit about who I am. I am Marian Siegel, and I am the Executive Director at Housing Counseling Services. And Housing Counseling Services, founded in 1972, is an organization that focuses on tenants, home buyers, homeowners, and the homeless to help them develop their skills and access resources so that they can maintain their highest level of housing independence. And we do that through a variety of programs and services. And in the case of tenants, we are working with tenants from the aspect of preserving their rental homes, in ensuring that they understand their rights and responsibilities as tenants, in accessing rental assistance, and in partnering with many of you in when we organize tenant associations and engaging tenants in the TOPA process. So we know many of you through various aspects of our work with tenants, as well as our aspects with other areas in our service category. But today, the focus really is on how to keep tenants in their homes and how to encourage them to take the steps necessary to apply for these programs so that we can get payments out to property owners. We recognize that these rental assistance programs really have a dual purpose. And in designing these programs, the purpose is, again, to prevent homelessness, prevent evictions, and to ensure that property owners have the necessary resources. We hope that these programs are engaging everybody at this stage to prevent the tidal wave that we all expect to see coming once the moratorium on evictions is lifted in DC. And with that, we're going to be talking about the 7 different programs we operate. These programs, some of them were the same pre-pandemic, some of them have been enhanced since the pandemic, and some of them are new since the pandemic. But regardless of where we started working with these programs, we are constantly tweaking them to be responsive to the needs that we see out there. The failure of the programs to quickly make payment to landlords is, we think, due to 2 different purposes. One is that without the threat of immediate eviction, tenants are less likely to apply quickly and be responsive to all of the documentation requirements that some of these programs require. But secondly, a really more important aspect is the technology gap that tenants have in applying for these programs. And internally, we're trying to relieve that technology gap by giving a lot of ways for tenants to access the programs, whether it be a tenant with limited internet access. We are allowing people to fax to us, to email to us, to mail to us, and to take photographs of their documents. We're doing everything possible to ensure that tenants can access the programs. But nonetheless, we have applicants who have really no technology to support these needs. And we are trying to come up with ways to support those populations. We have services in 7 different languages on staff and others using outside interpreters and translators. And we want to make sure that these programs are readily available to the LEP community and the immigrant community. We'll talk a little bit about eligibility when we get into the nitty-gritty of the programs in terms of residency documentation that is or is not required for each of these programs. Later in the discussion, we'll talk about kind of the details of how we're responding to the increasing demand, our approaches for group intake, for online intake, and for other approaches. But what we ask of you today is to consider how you can join us in helping tenants in this process, and ultimately by helping the tenants, we'll be able to get payments out faster. What we believe that property managers, property owners, and others can do is there's 2 different areas that we ask for you to consider. One is literally helping people in scanning documents where that is a challenge for your tenants. So whether that's an on-site management office where they can kindly help tenants scan documents to us so that we can conduct fast approval. But the other area is to consider enticements for completing applications. And those enticements can be something as simple as a food basket, a food card, or perhaps a $50 reduction in the following month's rent after a payment is made on back rents. And we find that those little enticements might be the little push that some tenants need to take the next step. We hope that you'll consider those in your own communities. So we come at this from 2 different fronts. How to engage the tenants more how to engage tenants better, how to make sure that they can access these programs, and then how to engage property owners and property managers in the process. There are 2 other areas that we need property managers and owners to engage in. One is promptly supplying us with W-9s and payment ledgers so that we can make the final approval and make the payments. And that is getting those prompt responses sometimes is the difference between a 1 and 2 week delay we find. So responding to your tenants and responding to us will get you a quicker payment. While we ask you to get fully involved in partnering with us and helping to develop this symbiotic relationship, we also want you to know that while we ask for this help, when you call us asking for where an application is in process, we may not be able to answer the particular question. Remember, the applicant is our client, and unless they provide us with approval to share information with a property manager or a property owner, we're very limited in what we can actually share with you. So we can ask you for information, but unfortunately we can't share so much information. These programs have a variety of sources of funding. We have the ERAP program with local funding, the CHAP program with, it's a new program, it's COVID related, but with federal funding. The COVID TBRA program, again, a new program with federal funding, and then the ongoing EFA, STRUMU, and SSVF programs for the other federal fully funded program. We have one small donation related program, which is the 202 Assist program. And what everyone needs to realize, what we tell our clients when they apply and what we want you to understand is that while some of these programs have allowed us to be more flexible with documentation requirements and eligibility requirements, most are federally funded programs and most are very strict on what we can do. We're very thankful to the mayor, to the council, and to advocates for their recent changes to the ERAP program that does in fact make it much more responsive and much more appropriate for the current circumstances. Susan, when we get into the ERAP program, we'll talk about those changes. and the accessibility ease and the payment level increases that has made ERAP more responsive. The rest of the programs, and again, when we talk about those, we'll get into them, as they are federal programs. The documentation requirements are, as you can imagine, steep and varied, and we cannot waive them. And that's, again, where we ask you to kind of really help us drill down to these individual requirements so that you can help your tenants access these programs. We look at ways to stack the programs, to time the programs, and to engage tenants in a client-centered approach so that we can be sure that tenants can access the full range of the services and funds available to help them through this crisis. Even while ERAP has increased its payment standard, we're now, 7 months into the pandemic, and ERAP will cover 5 months of rent. So we're already needing to stack programs and layer programs to meet people's needs who have been laid off since the start of the pandemic. As we also know, the ERAP program was very highly used before the pandemic. So we have people who are still at need, were still at need before the pandemic heat, and then we have the increased demand as a result of the economic crisis that so many tenants in DC are facing. So as we go through each of these programs, I'm going to start passing on to our other staff. We're going to start today with Susan Jacob, who is the program director for homelessness prevention. And she is going to be joined by Jay Forth, who will help her in her presentation of 4 different programs, starting with the ERAP program, which many of you have heard about for years, but she'll go into not only how the program actually work, but the changes in the program and the access for the program. She'll then move into the CHAP program, the COVID TBRA program, and she'll touch on the 202 Assist program. After Susan, Oscar Mitchell, who's our program director for programs and policies, will talk about the programs that are focused on the needs of veterans at risk of homelessness or homeless veterans, and for tenants who are living with HIV or AIDS, and the specific tenant rental assistance programs available to those populations. As I said, we have 7 different programs under our roof at this time. And it is an interesting challenge to ensure that we use these resources to best serve everybody in the short term and in the long term. And it is with those programs that we ask your partnership. So Susan, if you can take over from here.
Sure. Hello, everyone. As Marian mentioned, my name is Susan Jacob. I'm the program director of the Homelessness Prevention Program, Housing Counseling Services, and I have worked in this department for the last 11 years. So I'm very familiar with these rental assistance programs that I'm going to be talking about today. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over some basic information about ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and then CHAP, the COVID-19 Housing Assistance Program. The way that we present these programs to participants of our webinars is that we present them together, which is the same thing I'm going to do today. So you can also get a feel of what your tenants will be experiencing when they attend the webinars at Housing Counseling Services. So both the ERAP program and the CHAP program are emergency rental assistance programs that can assist with back rent. CHAP can only assist with back rent, but ERAP does have the added benefit of being able to provide assistance with first month's rent and security deposit as well. So for ERAP, the maximum payment amounts that you can receive, and these are actually changes given the new emergency legislation that was passed. The old regulations for ERAP are no longer in effect as of right now. And so the new regulations do allow for 5 months of rent to be paid up to the FMR amount. So what that means is if the tenant is charged rent that is above the FMR amount monthly, we are able to go up to the maximum FMR amount. So if your tenant is charged, for example, $2,000 a month for rent, but the FMR allows for $1,500, we would be able to assist the client with $1,500 times 5 months of back rent. If the FMR amount is above the monthly rent, we can obviously go up to the amount of rent that is charged for the tenant. For somebody who is considered to be disabled in the household, or if there are 7 or more members, we are able to increase that 5-month rental amount to 7 months. The FMR limit still applies, so we would need to look at that as we are determining how much money we can provide the tenant. But just so you know that if there are these situations in the household of a disability or a large household, we can look for up to 7 months of rent. Another change with the emergency regulations are the amount that we can pay for security deposit and first month's rent. So previously it was a much smaller amount, but now we are able to assist up to the FMR amount. So if somebody's security deposit is $2,000 and that is within the FMR limit, we are able to then assist with the full $2,000. So that's ERAP. For CHAP, the maximum requirements are a little bit different. So CHAP can assist with $4,250 or 3 months, whichever is less, and the months are supposed to be consecutive, and the rent can only be covered starting in April 2020. And the reason for that is because the program is set up to assist with back rent that is due once the public health emergency was declared, which was on March 13th. So if your tenant owes rent from April till November, CHAP can assist with April, May, and June. And then another thing that CHAP DHCD did add with the CHAP program is applicants can be eligible for a second set of 3 months up to $4,250. The way that that works is a tenant would have to be approved for the first 3 months and then would have to, again, inform Housing Counseling Services that they are in need of a potential second set of 3 months. A tenant would not have to reapply. However, we would need to be made aware of the tenant's current income situation. So an example would be if a tenant applies for CHAP and we assist with April, May, and June, and the application was open in July, and the person then comes back in November and says, I need another 3 months of assistance because I'm still behind due to COVID. In November, we would have to reevaluate that tenant's income situation. So if the tenant did receive, let's say, employment in September, we would now need to look at their employment to see where they fall within the income guidelines for CHAP. And later on in this presentation, I will show you what the income limits are for ERAP and for CHAP. But I just want to make sure that that is understood. New application does not have to be submitted for a second set of 3 months, but we will be evaluating their current income situation to ensure that they are still eligible for the CHAP program. If you could move to the next slide, please. So just a little bit of information as to who in the District of Columbia provides assistance. And in red are the CHAP providers. So Housing Counseling Services, the United Planning Organization, and the Greater Washington Urban League. 3 of us have ERAP and CHAP as our programs for rental assistance. And then in addition, ERAP can also be accessed at Catholic Charities, the Salvation Army, and the Community Partnership for the Prevention of Homelessness. Just to go into a little bit of legal and court-related information that we let our tenants know during the presentation. And these are items that were put into place during the public health emergency. So we do inform tenants that landlords cannot raise the rent during the public health emergency plus 30 days, which is currently scheduled to end on December 31st. But we are aware that the mayor does know that cases are potentially and are rising in DC, and that will be reevaluated. Additionally, no evictions can take place during the public health emergency plus 60 days. New eviction court cases cannot be filed during the public health emergency plus 60 days. Landlords cannot charge late fees during the public health emergency plus 15 days. There are no utility shutoffs right now during the public health emergency. And when we do provide the application, we usually have a list of resources for list of legal resources that tenants can access pro bono if they have any needs or questions regarding their situation. No one at Housing Counseling Services is an attorney, so we are not able to provide legal advice, but we do direct tenants to legal advocates if they need it. Next slide, please. So to go into eligibility for both the programs, for ERAP, ERAP is on the left and CHAP is on the right. So, but in general, for both programs, you must be a DC resident and you must meet the income requirements, the income requirement maximums. So obviously you can be below the income requirement. For ERAP, the income has gone up due to the emergency regulations. And so now it is at up to 40% of the area median income or AMI. And for CHAP, it is up to 80% of the AMI. And I do have slides later on that will show you what that looks like. For ERAP, in addition, you must be at least 30 days behind on your rent. And if you are applying for first month's rent and security deposit, you must be homeless or be at risk of homelessness. And we can talk about what that documentation looks like a little bit later. For CHAP, in addition to the DC residency and the income requirement, your delinquency must be COVID related. I do want to stress this because we do sometimes get applications where a tenant is not able to document a COVID related emergency. And CHAP is a program that was born of the funds that came down from the CARES Act, and so is directly related to the public health emergency. And so we must need a COVID-related emergency to be documented. The emergency has to occur in line with the DC date of emergency, which was March 13th. As I stated before, the delinquency has to have begun in April. And so if there's anything on a tenant's ledger that is before April 2020, we will not be able to consider it for the CHAP program. And then some examples of a COVID-related emergency could be, and the most common that we receive is job loss due to COVID-related emergency or medical expenses. We have definitely looked at applications more recently where parents have to stay home with their children and they can show documentation of that and expenses related to that due to school being online as opposed to in person. Or individuals that are looking for work right now and can document their efforts, but are unable to become employed due to businesses being closed or being told that due to COVID, there is no hiring. So we are able to look at different situations and evaluate them. We understand that everyone is in a stressful situation right now, and it is hard to find work and you know, those types of things are occurring. So we are able to look at those different situations, but these are just some examples that I can give you. Could you move to the next slide, please? So this slide and the next slide are the income limits for ERAP and for CHAP. So I just want to point out again that the income limits for ERAP have gone up. So instead of being 125% of the federal poverty level, which is very low, it is now at 40%, up to 40% of the AMI. And just to give you an example of the difference, the old ERAP income for one person was $1,320. So you can see that the income has gone up substantially. And so just to keep that in mind when you are looking at the income for your tenants. Next slide, please. And this is the CHAP income. So I've broken it down between 30%, 50%, 60%, and 80%, 80% being the maximum that a household can have. One of the things I didn't mention previously that this just reminded me of is related to the income calculation for CHAP and for ERAP. For ERAP, we look at the net income in a 30-day period. So that is after taxes and after mandatory deductions, things like that. For CHAP, we look at the gross income in a 60-day period. So that is before any deductions or anything are taken out. And that is a difference between both programs, and obviously could affect the way that someone's income is calculated depending on how much they earn and what deductions are taken out, things like that. So I just want to make sure that that is understood, that ERAP, we look at net income, and CHAP, we look at gross income. The next slide, please. Okay. I am going to go over the individual applications and documentation lists for ERAP and for CHAP individually, but I do want to explain at Housing Counseling Services what happens once somebody attends a webinar or even turns in an application. So the first things I do want to mention are you can sign up for appointment for ERAP or for CHAP through the DHCD and DHS portals. I have updated appointments in the portal for both programs, and so those should be accessible. When somebody is signed up for the program, they will receive a Zoom link for the webinar where they will register for the webinar and then can attend. However, at Housing Counseling Services, you do not need to go through the portal if it is too difficult. And you can also try to register online through Housing Counseling Services. We have registration for the webinar there as well. Also, the applications for ERAP and for CHAP are available online on Housing Counseling Services website. And so if someone is unable to attend the webinars, you can still access the application and the documentation lists in English and in Spanish for ERAP and for CHAP on our website. But once someone attends a webinar, they will learn exactly what I showed you today, which is the differences between both programs and eligibility. And the applicant can determine which program best fits their situation eligibility. They can absolutely speak to staff in the homelessness prevention program department if they have questions about their eligibility. But they can also, like I said, access the application by themselves and provide it. They can fill it out and collect the documentation per the checklist that we have. And for ERAP and for CHAP at Housing Counseling Services, we have set up 2 different email addresses where they can be sent. So the ERAP at housing-etc.org or CHAP at housing-etc.org. If you have questions related to those programs as well, you can email those specific email addresses and somebody will respond to your question as well. Once we receive the application, the tenant will be assigned a processor who will communicate regarding the status, and additional documents could be requested during this process because the person is reviewing the application turned in by the tenant or the client. And then once all the documents requested are turned in, the file will be reviewed and a decision will be made on approval or denial. If approved, the landlord will receive a letter and payment, as will the client will receive a letter stating they were approved. If during the process we see that somebody may have applied for ERAP but is better suited for CHAP or vice versa, we will contact that person and choose a different program. We make this process, or we try to make this process as seamless as possible, in that we don't ask people to fill out applications again. We will get all the information if we need to over the phone or email. Some documents may need to be turned in since CHAP, for example, does ask for an additional 30 days versus ERAP, but we do try to make that process as seamless as possible. If a person is denied, they will receive a letter explaining the decision of denial for both programs. We do not contact landlords if a tenant is denied, since that is information between the tenant and HCS, unless the tenant allows us and gives us permission to speak with the landlord about it. Both applications have a 60-day time limit, and after 60 days, the application will be considered abandoned, and you would receive a letter from us detailing that decision as well. We definitely try to work with tenants on submitting all the documents for the application, and also specifically regarding the ERAP program, so that I'm not talking about the CHAP program right now, and I'll get a little bit into this when we talk about documents. The new regulations allow ERAP applicants to self-certify any of the eligibility information that we ask. So what that means is if somebody, for example, is unable to turn in bank statements because of accessibility due to technology or something to that effect, we do give them 7 days to turn in that information. And if they are unable to do so, we send them a self-certification form, or we can fill it out over the phone if they're unable to receive it, where they would certify that they whatever is in the bank statements that we would have received is true. Say they would tell us that the amount that they have in there is $100, and that they would certify that that statement is true. Explain briefly why they haven't been able to get that information. It could be something as simple as, I don't have a computer, and then sign it, date it, and we would move on. And that is from the new emergency legislation, where applicants are able to self-certify for ERAP any of the eligibility information. Self-certification and waivers are not available for CHAP, so I'm only talking about ERAP. And Housing Counseling Services, we have come up with a self-certification form that we would send out, or that we can do over the phone. That is also available in English and in Spanish. Precious, if you could bring up the ERAP application that I sent you and the ERAP documentation list.
Can you see that, Susan?
I cannot. The slide I see is my next step slide.
Okay, hold just one moment.
Sure. Okay. Okay, thank you. If you could just continue to scroll down until I tell you to stop. And I'm sorry, I didn't note the exact page when the actual application starts. These are all the pages that would come with the ERAP application, but I'm going to actually scroll down to the actual application. If you could keep going, please. Keep going, keep going, keep going. It should be the next one. Okay, here we go. This is the first page. Okay, so this is the application for ERAP. So I will also go over the CHAP application, although I do want to keep in mind that they are very similar to each other. So we do ask that every application line be filled out. So if, for example, something doesn't apply, like for example, if a tenant doesn't have a middle name or a maiden name, if you could just put NA, or the tenant could put NA, that would make it easier for us, so that we know that nothing was overlooked during the application process. I'm sorry, during the application being filled out. So we do ask for, the first section here is the applicant information and the household information. I also do want to point out that the new ERAP regulations have taken away the need to document a household. So previously, we would need to know if somebody was living with their sister, for example, that the two people were related to each other, and we would have to see, birth certificates or something to show that. The new regulations state that We do not need to document a household anymore, and anybody who is on the application, listed on the application, is part of a household. So we do need to know if you have received rental assistance in the past 12 months. And that is because at this time, ERAP still only allows approval for assistance once in a 12-month period. So if somebody applied for assistance December 24th, 2019, and they were approved, they're not eligible again for assistance until December 24th, 2020. The address is very important for ERAP. Like I stated, we do need to know that someone is a DC resident. And then the next section is the applicant lists themselves and anyone else that is in who they consider to be in their household. We do not require social security numbers for ERAP. So if that is something that it cannot be provided, that is fine. But we do need to know if somebody is employed and what the net monthly income is. And I do want to stress that this is actually even more vitally important. It's always been important, but because people can self-certify now, this application also serves as documentation of what they are telling us regarding their situation, their household, their income. So even though we do ask people to fill out the self-certification form, we do want the information in the application to be complete and accurate. And so if you go down to the bottom of this page, we do ask for employer information if you have it, and if you would like us to, if you would allow us to contact your employer. Sometimes we do contact employers because we need to get clarification on income, for example. And then we also would like to know if anyone listed above is disabled. I'll go into documentation for disability once we go into documentation, but we do want to know if someone's disabled because, as I stated before, that could change the amount of assistance that somebody is eligible to receive. You could keep going, please. So here is where you would write the type of assistance that the tenant is applying for. If it's back rent, security deposit, first month's rent. We do need to know bedroom size, and this is even more important now because the new regulations state we can utilize the FMR in order to determine how much assistance someone can receive, and FMR is based on zip code and bedroom size. So if we don't know bedroom size, then that could delay a little bit because we have to try to figure it out from the tenant or the lease if it's in there. So we just ask that this is why we also ask that everything should be filled out completely. Section 10B, which is where you would enter the landlord's name, the address if you have it, and the phone number, is really important. This section is often left blank, and that just causes a delay as well because then we are scrambling trying to figure out the landlord's phone number, who the landlord is. And so we do really need to have this information. 11 is why the person is requesting this assistance. And during this time, it may be, very easy to explain that COVID has provided, COVID has, is the reason why someone is behind on their rent. But we do need this section filled out because we do also use it as a reason for why someone fell behind and what the emergency situation is. If there's anyone who's not related that shares responsibility for the rent, we would like to know that. That's generally somebody who doesn't live in the home with the person who's applying. So if they have a co-signer or something like that, that would be where, this is where you would put that information. If you could keep scrolling down, please. So here for income information, this information is different from that first section where you would write what your monthly income is from employment. This is unearned income. So income that you or your tenant would receive on a monthly basis. For example, TANF, Social Security, veterans benefits, disability benefits. We do ask that this is filled out completely. So if someone doesn't receive something, to check off no, because if something is blank, which is natural, it does happen because people are like, well, it doesn't apply to me at all, or, I'm going to overlook it, then we have to go back and ask the question. I do want to point out that for ERAP, monthly monthly payments from someone who's trying to help out is considered income. If you get a loan, it's considered an income. Anything that comes into your household is considered income. So just to be aware of that as tenants are completing this application. Could you scroll, please? Thank you. So here we do want to know if someone receives food stamps and how much. Food stamps are not considered income for ERAP, but we do like to know if somebody is receiving that type of monthly assistance. And if there's any other one-time assistance payments during the 90 days, we would just like to know what that is. So the example that I generally give during the webinars would have been if someone received the stimulus payment of $1,200, they could say yes, and how much is left over. Since we look at 90 days, it wouldn't really count towards income if someone received it, 3-4 months ago. But we just do like to know, just as a general picture of what's happening with the client situation. And then if any unrelated persons live with you, this question is really moot at this point because anyone in your house, anyone who lives with you can be considered part of your household. But you can also list them out if they're, if someone's living with you temporarily, let's say, for a few months. We do need to know their name, how much they pay for rent, if any, and anything for meals. And then if you continue down, we do just talk about income more so. Does anything change in the last 30 days? Have you described all your income? And then section 20 is the place where you would list out bank information. So we do need to know about savings accounts, checking accounts, IRAs, stocks, insurance policies, property other than owner-occupied home, boat, camper, recreational vehicle. All of these things are assets that we do need to know about. I do want to stress that we also do look to see if somebody has other accounts like ACE, NetSpend, Direct Express, Green Dot, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. We do look to see what type of income goes in and out of these accounts. Very small deposits. We do take into consideration that someone may have paid for dinner or someone may have paid for something else that was paying the person back. We do engage in conversations with clients about that, but we do need to know about it. And if we do see it on a bank statement, but we don't have that information, then we would need to ask for it. The last two questions on this page are essentially asking if anything was sold in the last 30 days or the last year that was then converted into cash. And if so, to list out the amount and to explain what that was. If you could keep going. So here we just ask for expenses, monthly expenses, and we do ask that you just fill it out completely. If this expense doesn't apply to you, you can write NA or 0. We do use this in calculating the amount of assistance that someone can receive at this time. If that does change, obviously we will let everyone know, but for right now, we do still need to know this information. So and this is a monthly expense. So if somebody has a really large electric bill, for example, if the electric bill is $1,000, but really the monthly bill is $200, what we really want to know here is the $200, not the $1,000. And then if you could scroll down a little bit more, Precious. Thank you. This last section in the actual application is just asking if what efforts a person has made to try to resolve the situation on their own. It's perfectly fine when someone says that they weren't able to get assistance or they weren't able to get help. We do understand that. But we do want them to answer the question since it is part of the application. And then at the very bottom is where you would put a signature. The tenant would sign and date if possible, and then we would sign and date. If someone is not able to put a signature or anything like that, once we receive an application at Housing Counseling Services for ERAP and for CHAP, we do send out an acknowledgement email, which the person would just have to respond to saying that they accept and acknowledge it, as well as an email detailing who the processor is and the documents that we still need. Precious, if you could go to the documentation checklist for ERAP. Okay. So that application is what is found on our website, and this is the list for ERAP as well. I do want to, again, just remind everyone that people can self-certify for ERAP, but we generally do ask for photo ID for all household members 18 and above. And even though households do not need to be documented anymore, if you have birth certificates for children, that's fine. You can turn that in as well. We ask for lease or proof of residency. Generally, this comes from a lease for people that are applying for back rent. Specifically, we do need this information because one of the basic requirements for ERAP is documenting DC residency. We would need proof of wages received during the last 30 days from the application date. It can be pay stubs, Uber weekly statements, etc. We do recognize that people who utilize Uber, who work for Uber, Lyft, Postmates, those types of things, they can also do a profit and loss statement because a lot of the time, they're working for themselves and they have expenses related to that. And we have a profit loss statement that they can fill out if needed. We do ask for proof of unearned income. And like I said, that would be Social Security, TANF, child support, things like that. Official transaction histories for all accounts during the last 30 days from the application date. And I've listed out the ones that we most commonly see. Proof of disability, if applicable, for the household. And it can be a letter from a doctor, psychiatrist, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant. We ask that it say the word disabled because no one at HCS are doctors. And so we're not able to determine if, for example, a diagnosis is considered, for example, a diagnosis of diabetes would be considered disabling to that person, but a doctor can diagnose that and can state that. If there are issues getting those types of documentation, we can definitely talk about it. And also there is a self-certification form. Proof of expenses if tenants have it, but it's not the biggest deal in the world if they don't. And if they're able to provide documentation of being able to pay rent for the next 30 days, ERAP does have a requirement that a payment that is made will alleviate an emergency for 30 days. So it could be job searches, returning to employment, increase in unearned income, something like that. But we do ask for that. The next section I've broken up into back rent and security deposit and first month's rent. We ask for an itemized and updated ledger because we need to know how much we are going to be assisting with, and we need documentation from the landlord for that. And we need some sort of documentation of the emergency. The reason fell behind. So that's the question in the ERAP application that I had stated earlier. Sometimes it's left blank. We just need to know what we could ask for in that situation. And then for security deposit, first month's rent, we ask for the approval letter for the unit. And we do want the letter to include the address of the new unit. Sometimes we get letters stating that the person has been applied for an apartment at a particular residence, but it's not concrete, and it could be like a preliminary approval. We do need to know that the person is actually approved for a unit. And then the reason for the move or reason that someone needs assistance for security deposit could be a threat of homelessness, could be verification of homelessness from a letter from a shelter. For voucher holders, we do ask the need to move, if there was a failed inspection or change in family size. Some things I didn't put on here are also if there's family reunification happening. Obviously, a bigger place might be needed. That is also a reason to need a new place. And then I've also put on here so that everyone is aware what a landlord would need to provide. Some, if not all, of the following documentation, and this list is the same for CHAP and for ERAP. We would need a W-9 signed and dated in the current year. A management agreement if the payment is not going directly to the owner. We do look in the various DC property databases to see who is listed as the owner. So if the owner is listed as John Smith, but the management company is, for example, Home Realty, If Home Realty wants payment made to them, we would need to see the management agreement between John Smith and Home Realty that allows us to make the payment to Home Realty. If we can't find proof of ownership, we do ask for proof of ownership. Proof of where payment should be sent, picture ID for private landlords, and proof of social security number for private landlords. And this is so that we can make sure that the information on the W-9 is also accurate given the private landlord's name and social security number as well. Precious, if you could go to the CHAP application next. And you could scroll down. This is Housing Counseling Services intake form. It's on both applications. We would really like you to fill this out. Actually, could you go back up for a second? I'm sorry. To the intake form. I do actually really need to stress this form for CHAP specifically. We do need it for both applications, and it is in both application packets. But for CHAP, we are also required to enter information because it is a program that comes from HUD. So we do need this information filled out accurately and completely. If we do not have some of this information, we will have to come back and ask the tenant to complete it accurately, because we are not able to, guess on some of this information, and we would not want to guess on any of this information. So we do need this form filled out accurately, and it's very self-explanatory. It's just the applicant's information: name, address, birth date. Really important would be birth dates, gender, total people in household, annual household income. Do children under 6 live or visit in the home regularly? Are you Latino, Hispanic? We do need to know race. Do you have a disability? Primary language? All of the questions, like I said, are important, but we do need to know, are there veterans? Are there any DC government employees? So definitely this intake form needs to be filled out very completely. Now you can scroll down to the application. Precious, thank you. So this is the CHAP application. And as I said, it is very similar to the ERAP application. There are just some minor differences. So for example, they do ask for bedroom size here, which we also do know. We need to have the client's information, name, address, phone number. If you can scroll down more. And then here would be the household information. CHAP also recognizes anyone in the household that you list here is considered to be part of your household. We do not ask for documentation regarding that. CHAP doesn't ask for birth certificates or anything like that. If you supply it, that's fine, but we don't necessarily need it. Here we do ask if someone is disabled as well. The question is just within the household information, and then the employer and the gross monthly income. And if you scroll down, they do want to know if any unrelated persons live with you. Same as ERAP, you could put their name, their amount they pay for rent and for meals. If you can keep going, Precious. Here is where we ask for how you've been impacted by COVID and why you're requesting rental assistance. This is important, as we do need to be able to document very clearly what your COVID-related emergency is. So we do need to know this information, and then also any expenses that you would have incurred, as we can also ask for this information as documentation of your COVID-related emergency. They do want to know if you've received, or if the tenants received ERAP in the last 12 months. And we also need to know the amounts of back rent you need and the amount, and then the information for the landlord. As I stated before, very important. If we don't have it, we then have to scramble to try to get it, and it's so much easier to just have it here on the application. You can scroll down to income information. So here is where you would include employer information if the tenant is employed, if they've lost income since March 13th. We do need to know if they are eligible for unemployment. Have they voluntarily left a job? if we can contact the employer. And I do want to say, as I stated for ERAP, we don't need social security numbers. For CHAP, they don't ask for social security numbers either. However, if we do not ask about anyone's status regarding citizenship or anything like that. Those are questions that do not come up during our webinar, during our intake, when we are processing applications. However, if we are made aware that somebody is considered undocumented, we would not be able to continue with the application. So I just want to make that clear that we do not ask that information. We do not want to know about a person's status. But if we do find out, we would not be able to continue with this application for CHAP. So just keep that in mind as tenants are completing these applications. So if you could go down to income, it's the same income chart as last time, and I actually don't know why government pension is checked off no, sorry about that. But it would need to be filled out as well completely. So if there is, if someone doesn't receive any of these items, that's fine, just check off no. If you could keep going, please. So income information, if they receive food stamps, one-time assistance payment, same as ERAP. Has the income changed? Was all the money, household income described? All of that is the same as the ERAP application. And then if you continue down to question 22, it's the same bank account information as well. So we would just need to know the same, and we ask for the same things for CHAP as for ERAP when it comes to bank account information. And then also if any resources have been converted to cash in the last 30 days, or in the last 12 months if anything was sold, transferred, or traded. And then at the very bottom is the signatures. The same thing for CHAP as for ERAP. If someone is unable to sign, that's fine. We send acknowledgement emails to CHAP applicants as well as the second email that details the processor and the contact information as well as the documents. If you could go to the documentation list for CHAP next, Precious. Okay, so the list here, like I said, we do ask for photo IDs for all household members 18 above, proof of the COVID-related emergency, lease, and proof of residency, just the same as ERAP. Like I said, I do want to say for the proof of your COVID-related emergency, just to go back 1 second, we absolutely need that for the CHAP application. And I stress that only because we seem to get a lot of CHAP applications without that specific piece of documentation. And I think it's just because it's a rental assistance program. And so people kind of take it the same as ERAP, which doesn't have that requirement. But since this is a specific COVID-related program, we do need that documentation. And then also for CHAP, which is a little bit different from ERAP, is proof of all wages and income received in the last 60 days of the application date. I should say for CHAP, we have to follow HUD Part 5 income certifications, which is very detailed, very thorough, and can be intensive. So we do need to make sure that we are following all of those requirements for our income calculations, so that we are in line with the HUD Part 5 income certifications. So if we are asking for more information or more clarification around someone's income, wages, bank statements, it's because we do have to follow HUD Part 5, and we are not able to stray from that. So we do have to follow HUD Part 5. And then the same as ERAP, we need the official transaction histories for accounts. We've included the Cash App link, and I should have said this for ERAP because this seems to be the most common non-traditional bank account that people have, and they have sometimes a hard time accessing it. So we have to assist with that process. Proof of all assets, and then an updated and itemized ledger, which we will need in order to be able to make payment. And then at the very bottom, the same as ERAP, I won't go over it again, but it is the items the landlord would need to provide. in order to be able to have the applicant be considered for final approval and payment. Okay, so the other two programs that I will also just briefly touch upon, and I apologize, I don't actually have a slide on them, is I'm going to first talk about 202 Assist, which is a program that is designed to assist tenants who live in Ward 8. The maximum amount of assistance that someone can receive through this program would be $1,000. And very little documentation is needed for that program. We just need to know that someone lives in Ward 8, and we can provide assistance for that program. Currently at Housing Counseling Services, we are looking at applications we have in-house, and we are able to see if someone is eligible for the program. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard a noise. And we can see if someone is eligible for that program. And then we also have the COVID TBRA program. Housing Counseling Services is not currently taking any more new applications for that program. However, that program, actually, Marion, maybe you can help me with this portion.
Sure. Sorry, everybody. Just want you to know my power went off in my house. I heard the explosion outside somewhere, but I'm on my cell service, so hopefully this will work. The COVID TBRA program is still being operated. We believe LEDC still has some funds. We have used up our funds, but we believe LEDC may have some funds, and that program allows for up to 6 months of back rent or forward rent for individuals who have a COVID-related emergency. It's a set rental amount based on income and bedroom size for the units. It can be stacked with ERAP, but cannot be stacked with CHAP. So again, we're not taking any new applications. We have used up all of those funds, but you might want to check with LEDC.
And I do want to, if you go back to the slide presentation, once Oscar is done presenting about his programs, there is a contact information slide. And on there, we also do have the contact information for Lydia's house, which is also still taking applications for 202 Assist. So you will have that information as well. Precious, can you go back to the slideshow presentation, please?
That, Susan, the presentation.
Yes, the presentation. I think I left off at the next step slide.
Oh, just one moment.
Go to the next slide after that. Okay. I went over all of this, and it's just a reminder, fill out every question on the applications, be sure all the information is accurate and reported. If the signatures are not able to be done, that's fine. We have those acknowledgement emails as well. And then we do ask that you gather as many documents as possible before submitting your application. But if not, we'll start the application process without documents. I also want to inform everyone that if somebody doesn't have, and I know that everyone here today is here so that we can assist tenants with these applications, but just if someone doesn't have the technology to be able to send in documents or applications, we do accept applications via mail. There is a little bit of a delay with that because our offices are closed, and so someone is not there every day to pick up the mail, but we do accept it that way. If someone would ever need that, we do offer that option as well. However, we do request that everyone send in documents and applications electronically if possible. I believe the next slide is Oscar's. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Again, we'll have another opportunity, hopefully, for question and answer at the conclusion, so that if you think of questions along the way for the program Susan went over, we can go back to them in that process at the conclusion. Oscar is going to talk about our specialized programs for veterans and for households where somebody is living with HIV or AIDS. Oscar, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. As Marion said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the targeted financial assistance programs that Housing Counseling Services offers. One is a program that targets services or financial assistance to U.S. military veterans, and the other programs target financial assistance to persons who are living with HIV. I'm going to be relatively brief in my presentation. Kind of the unique thing about these two programs, whereas when Susan was speaking of the ERAP and the CHAP program, there's a little bit more autonomy for applicants to complete the applications. But for these financial assistance programs, they actually have to largely come through Housing Counseling Services or meet or do their intake for these programs with a Housing Counseling Services staff. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through the different programs. So the first program I wanted to talk about is the Supported Services for Veteran Families program, or the SSVF program. Again, SSVF is a program that provides financial assistance and case management services to veterans who are homeless or at imminent risk of homelessness. And in the case of being behind in their rent, they would meet the criteria of being at imminent risk for homelessness. In terms of like basic eligibility criteria for the SSVF programs, it does have to be a veteran who served active duty. So sometimes we get individuals who may have been in the National Guard or may have served in the reserves. Unfortunately, unless you've been called to, if you did serve in one of those two branches, you would have had to have been called to active duty by a presidential order. Otherwise, if you served in the reserves or the National Guard, you would not be eligible for assistance under the SSVF program. Also, veterans who have a dishonorable discharge or had a court martial, they would not be eligible for assistance under the SSVF program. In terms of income, household income cannot exceed 50% of the HUD area median income. So, for example, one person household, the maximum income would be $44,100. Our Housing Counseling Services SSVF program pretty much serves the entire DC metropolitan area. So we serve the District of Columbia, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Fairfax County, Arlington counties, and the city of Alexandria. And in terms of financial assistance that we offer under the SSVF program, unlike with a lot of the other programs, there's not like a specific formula for how we provide financial assistance. We really look at it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we have to look at kind of what our agency's budget is for being able to provide financial assistance, as well as looking at the unique circumstances of the applicant who's providing who we may be providing financial assistance to. And also in terms of the SSVF program, in addition to rental assistance, we do offer, we have the capacity to provide financial assistance in the areas of security deposit, delinquent utilities, as well as transportation. However, it's something where that cannot be the sole purpose in which an individual is applying for financial assistance. I mean, really, to be eligible for SSVF services, a veteran has to be assessed as being either homeless or at risk of homelessness. So once they're assessed as being meeting one of those criteria, that opens up the door to being able to receive case management, as well as financial assistance for rent, as well as those other areas. And as I said, if it's something where someone is, if you have a veteran who is living at one of your properties, you can refer them to Housing Counseling Services SSVF program. You can use the number that's on your screen, the 202-667-7366. or the veteran can email our SSVF program directly at ssvf@housingetc.org. Preston, you can go to the next slide for me. So then we also have, for individuals who are HIV positive, we actually have several programs that can provide financial assistance. The first one I want to talk about is the Emergency Financial Assistance Program, or EFA program. So under the EFA program, we have the capacity to provide assistance with delinquent rent, as well as there are other categories that we can provide financial assistance under, which I'll talk about in a few moments. But in terms of basic eligibility for the EFA program, someone in the household must be HIV positive. The household income cannot exceed 500% of the federal poverty level, which is pretty generous. So like for a one-person household, a person's income cannot exceed $63,800. A person does have to be at least 1 month behind in their rent. They do have to live in one of our service areas. So they must either live in DC, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Charles County, Calvert County, or Frederick County. Now with the EFA program, unfortunately, we are not able to assist individuals who are living in subsidized housing. So if it's something where they're under the Section 8 or Housing Choice Voucher Program, some other federally subsidized program, or even local subsidy program, unfortunately, we cannot provide assistance. Now, in terms of levels of assistance, it's pretty generous. So during a 12-month period, a household that is determined eligible for EFA can receive 3 times the HUD fair market rent in terms of assistance. So here in the DC metropolitan area, the 1-bedroom FMR is $1,548. So the maximum financial assistance of a household can receive under the EFA program is 3 times that $1,548, which would equal $4,644, which is a pretty generous level of assistance that we offer. And it goes higher from there depending on the bedroom size that the household occupies. Again, in terms of accessing the EFA program, an individual would have to reach out to our agency to do an intake. And again, they can use the telephone number that's on your screen. So for our EFA program, that telephone number is 202-900-9471, or they can email the MAP program at mhap@housingetc.org. So our agency's MAP program pretty much oversees, so we have a kind of a suite or a wide variety of services that we offer to individuals who are HIV positive. And all of our HIV positive programs fall under the Metropolitan Housing Access Program, or MAP program. So the EFA program, as well as there's another financial assistance program I'm going to speak to you about in a few moments, fall under the MAP program. And as I said, there are some additional areas that the Emergency Financial Assistance Program can offer households who have someone who's living with HIV within them. If you could go to the next slide, I could kind of go through those real quick. So additional areas in which the EFA program can provide financial assistances includes first month's rent. So if you have someone who's HIV positive moving into a unit, they could be eligible for financial assistance for first month's rent if they meet the eligibility requirements. We provide emergency utility payments for gas, electric, and water related costs. In terms of receiving assistance towards utility payments, it is something where the household has to have a cutoff notice. It is required that they have a cutoff notice for us to be able to provide assistance for utility payments. We also can, under EFA, we can provide assistance towards telephone service. Again, it has to be something where someone has received a telephone shutoff notice, or the telephone service has been cut off. Those are the circumstances by which we can provide financial assistance. We can provide emergency moving assistance. So if someone is moving their belongings from one unit to another, we can provide financial assistance to cover those costs. One of the areas that we see substantial need is in terms of food vouchers. I mean, It's something where if a household is in need of emergency food assistance, if it's something where they've exhausted their food stamp allotment, or simply, there's been expenses that they've experienced, which has limited the funds that they have available to purchase food, they can apply for financial assistance for a food voucher, and we provide like emergency food cards that they can use at local grocery stores. And we also have the capacity to provide emergency medication assistance. Next slide, please. So then I also for individuals who are HIV positive, we also have a program called the STRUM-U program, STRMU. STRUM-U stands for Short-Term Rent, Mortgage, and Utility Assistance Program. This is a HUD-funded program, which allows us to provide financial assistance in those three basic areas. In terms of eligibility for the program, somewhat similar to EFA, you do have to be HIV positive. For the STRUM-U program, the income level is a bit lower. The income cannot exceed 50% of the area median income. So for a one-person household, the income cannot exceed $44,100. Someone has, if they're applying for rental assistance, they have to be at least 1 month behind in their rent. Again, households receiving a rental subsidy, any type of rental subsidy, unfortunately, the STRUM-U program cannot provide assistance. The one caveat when I spoke about the EFA program in terms of utility assistance, the EFA program, you have to have a cutoff notice, whereby under the STRUM-U program, it's not required that you have a cutoff notice. As long as you're behind in your utility bill, we can provide assistance. And our housing counseling services, in terms of our service area for the STRUM-U program, it's we only serve the District of Columbia and Prince George's County. So it's a smaller footprint that our agency serves for the STRUM-U program compared to the EFA program. And in terms of levels of assistance, so with STRUM-U, we can provide up to 5 months of assistance, but the maximum assistance being $3,000. So if a household combined the assistance that they receive under the STRUM-U program with the assistance that the maximum assistance that they can receive under the EFA program, we're able to provide assistance roughly $7,600 in rental assistance, combining those two programs. Again, if it's something where you have someone who is interested in applying for the STRUM-U program, you can provide them the intake number for the STRUM-U program. It's 202-900-9471. Or again, they can email the MAP program at map@housingetc.org, and we'll coordinate scheduling an appointment and doing an intake for the STRUM-U program. And then one more piece to the STRUM-U program, if we go to the next slide. So we have received additional money to respond to kind of the circumstances that are presented with the region dealing with the pandemic. We do have what's called COVID STRUM-U, which is very similar to the regular STRUM-U program, but there's some different caveats to the program. Again, you have to be HIV positive. However, there's a higher income limit for COVID STRUM-U. Whereas regular STRUM-U, your income, the household's income can't exceed 50% of AMI. With COVID STRUM-U, the income can go up to 80% AMI. So for a one-person household, that would be $55,750. Again, the person would have to be at least 1 month delinquent with their rent. In terms of COVID STRUM-U, it is something where for us to be able to provide assistance under the COVID STRUM-U program, their delinquency has to be directly tied to or a result of being impacted by the current COVID pandemic. So if it's something where a household has seen a decrease in their income as it relates to COVID, if they've seen an increase in their expenses to respond to this pandemic, to respond to the COVID pandemic, we would have to be a capacity to provide financial assistance. Again, households that are in a rental subsidy program are ineligible, and just like Strum U, the COVID-19 Strum U assistance program our program only serves the District of Columbia and Prince George's County. Now with the COVID Strum U, we can provide a maximum $5,000 of assistance, whereas regular Strum U, the maximum we can provide is $3,000. So, I mean, in reality, if a person is HIV positive, there's significant resources that individuals can use. I mean, really, again, if it's something where a household is eligible for EFA, Strum U, COVID Strum U, you're looking at, you know, a little bit over $12,500 worth of assistance that they can receive, which would be extremely helpful in terms of responding to, you know, a rental delinquency. Again, if someone is interested in applying for the COVID Strum U program, or again, any of the programs that provide financial assistance for persons who are HIV, they can call the 202 900-9471 number, or they can email the MAP program at map@housingetc.org. Also, you know, if it's something where you can provide we have much of this information on our agency's website. So if you have someone who's HIV positive, or you're working with someone or you know of a resident that's a veteran, you can also direct them to our website, the www.housingetc.org. And pretty much it provides an overview of all the financial assistance programs that I spoke of, from the SSVF program to the MAP program. And I believe it has the ERAP program on there as well. So that's a basic overview of the financial assistance programs that we have for specifically for individuals who are veterans, as well as those who are HIV positive.
Thank
So I
you
could
very
turn that over to Marion. Okay.
Thanks very much, Oscar. My power's back on. That's the good news. So I'm still working from my iPad, but at least I have battery power coming back. What I hope you've gotten from all of this is how complicated all of these programs are, and what the issues are that we often face when we're trying to stack and layer the programs in order to fully resolve a delinquency. Our goal, again, is to always say yes. Our goal is to make rental payments, but at the same time, these are federal funds, and therefore we are certainly required to analyze each application on its own merits, verify eligibility, and collect the documentation that might be required. All of the federal programs that you've heard about, you know, everybody gets tired and yawny when they start hearing all of the different documents we need to collect, but we actually do need to collect all of those documents. And when tenants get frustrated because they've submitted an application that documents many deposits into a online account, we actually have to document where all of those deposits have come from. So, you know, we ask that people be patient with us when we sound like we're nitpicking bureaucrats. But the fact of the matter is that we have to do this right, because we want the district to continue to get these federal funds to support these efforts. I can also say that if you were to stack all of these programs, I mean, Oscar talked briefly about for a household living with HIV or AIDS, the potential is there to collect, you know, over $12,000 in rental assistance. If you stack that with CHAP, you stack that with ERAP and with 202 Assist, we should be able to fill the gap for most tenants at this time. So our fear and our real reason for wanting to reach out to everybody today who's working with tenants is that while right now we're quite confident we can pay pretty much anybody's gap in rent, come February, March, and April, when perhaps if we're in some ways lucky enough that the moratorium is lifted. In other words, if the public health emergency is lifted and therefore eviction moratorium is lifted, we are expecting that those people who have not yet applied are now facing a tighter application period and a tighter amount of funds available and a much more stressed out staff, which is why we're encouraging everyone to get tenants to apply early, apply for what they qualify for now, and to allow us the opportunity to help them figure out which program it is that they best qualify for. And we got a few questions about how does somebody know which program to apply for? How does somebody learn about all these programs? I sent to Precious this morning one-page flyer that's in 5 different languages that is a brief summary of all of these programs. I'm going to ask her to post those along with this recording. We also will have that on our website. We also have all of this information on our website, and it changes. It's not a static situation. As we all know, we're changing with, we're dealing with a changing world, a changing environment. So we update our website as frequently as possible. While I have an audience of property owners out there, we also operate several other rental assistance programs that are more long-term. And one of those programs, we are looking to master lease, I think it's 7 more units of housing to support a 2-year transitional housing program. So we are looking to master lease 7 units of housing. We can use local area FMRs for that program. We're always looking for units. So we also know that as vacancy rates are starting to rise nationally and locally, we have property owners who are having vacancies. Let us know about your vacancies in general, whether you're interested in a master lease or not. As we operate, in addition to these rental assistance programs, we have a monthly housing search workshop for tenants, where we explain the process of searching for housing, the reality of searching for housing. And if units are known, we will make those units available to people who participate in those workshops. We have a weekly, I think it's weekly, tenant rights and responsibilities workshops. And we ensure that tenants understand what their rights are, not only during the state of emergency, but in normal life as well. Our goal is to develop a rapport with tenants so that they don't only understand their rights, they do also understand their responsibilities as tenants. And we believe that an educated tenant benefits not only their own household, but actually benefits property owners as well. And these other resources are also listed on our website. Again, our main goal is to encourage everybody who's on this call to learn as much as possible about these programs and to help your tenants apply for these programs. Let me check the chat box. Someone asks, when you say landlords may consider enticements for tenants, what do you mean? Are you worried that the money will run out before these programs? If so, when? Yes, I worry that the money will run out before next year. Well, not next calendar year, next fiscal year. We're hopeful in the changing federal environment that more resources will be made available. And while the council and with advocates' support did almost double the ERAP budget for this year, the number of tenants, if you start looking at national and local statistics, the number of tenants and homeowners who are significantly behind in their rent and mortgage is tremendous. So while at the moment we have plenty of resources to meet demand, we are not expecting that to necessarily meet demand. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know when we will run out. So what we're encouraging tenants to do is to apply now rather than wait. The next question is, after terminating their membership to benefit from ERAP, do members of limited equity co-ops need to sign another lease as tenants? There's been several questions about limited equity co-op members and what programs they qualify for. And to clarify that, right now, CHAP and COVID TBRA allow us to make payments to limited equity co-ops for members. ERAP is specific to the word tenants and rent. And so most limited equity co-ops have in their either bylaws or occupancy agreement, something that states that membership will be terminated if you are delinquent in your membership fees, and that you can be reinstated upon payment of any delinquency. So when a member of a co-op applies for ERAP, we need to look at their bylaws as to what the rules are, and we can very often make the payment if they temporarily lose their membership. Do they have to sign a lease? No, they do not have to sign a lease. So if you have specific questions to co-ops, work with Susan, who can get you some updates. And no, LECs are not legally required to replace membership. So that's why it's so important to look at the bylaws of the limited equity co-op to determine which program, what risks anybody might have in using ERAP as a member. Next question I have is, will we be able to obtain copies of the slides that are shared on this webinar? And yes, Precious, we'll be posting a recording of this webinar on the CNHED website, and that will include slides as well. Question is, so if an applicant is approved to rent on the property, are they eligible to apply for assistance with security deposit and first month's rent? Most of the security deposit and first month rent programs that we operate, the applicant, most of them has to demonstrate that they are either currently homeless or at risk of homelessness in order to get first month's rent and security deposit. That can be broadly applied. So for instance, if they are leaving a situation where their unit is in poor condition, we can consider that risk of homelessness. We try and be as broad as we can be within the confines of the federal regulations. Again, first month's rent and security deposit is usually limited to somebody who can demonstrate that they are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. Next question is recommendation for online appointment scheduling. The DMV shuts down every Tuesday from 11:30 to 12 for maintenance and to reset. At 12 p.m. there are 2-week appointment schedules. Can people go online? I don't know what that's referring to because we're not the DMV, but no, there's no real strategy to getting an appointment online. I can tell you that what we say is that the DHS and the DHCD online portals for scheduling appointments is the best way to start, because those portals are open to all of the providers who are doing application intake. And we are concerned that if everybody uses an HCS only webinar for intake of applications, we will be so overwhelmed that application intake will slow to a crawl. So if an applicant, if a tenant is unable to get a DHS portal appointment, they can try contacting HCS at the address or phone numbers you'll see on the slides to see if we can get them into one of our weekly group intake webinars. So again, first try the portal. If a tenant either does not have the technology to use a portal or cannot access a portal appointment, try us directly. The portal does have limitations in terms of language and does have limitations in terms of cellular devices. Basically, it requires a computer to access the portal. So again, first try the portal, then try us. Are there other questions? Let's see.
Marion, we have a question in the chat from Kim Gordon, who asks, is there still a program for mortgage assistance for HIV position clients?
In terms of mortgage assistance, and I can have Precious post. I think I sent you, Precious, our mortgage assistance flyer yesterday as well that you could post. The first entry point for anybody who's in crisis for mortgage assistance is our foreclosure hotline, and through that hotline we'll talk about any assistance programs that are available. At the moment, the HIV mortgage assistance is much more limited, but there is a DC program, again, also called the MAP program, but without an H, through DC Office of DC Housing Finance Agency, and the MAP program, MAP program, can offer up to $5,000 a month in mortgage assistance for homeowners who have a COVID-related emergency and who can document that their mortgage company or their condo association is not offering forbearance to them. So again, I don't have it off the top of my head, but we can post it online, is the foreclosure prevention hotline that will help anybody who's behind in their mortgage. Going back to questions. I am not seeing.
Marion, there's a question. What programs are available to pay for tenants' utilities, especially water?
We are not aware of any specific programs at this time. There might be one through Greater Washington Urban League. They did have a water program in the past, but I'm not particularly aware of any myself at this time. And we can do a little bit of research and make sure we get it posted onto our website.
Just Marion, just to add, the EF for individuals who are HIV positive, they can apply through EFA and STRUM-U.
For mortgage assistance, or for water, for water.
For mortgage and water assistance.
Right. Okay. I see, you know, in terms of enticements in the last question, the type of enticements, the reason why we're suggesting landlords might consider enticements is we hear from landlords their frustration when their tenants don't appear to be taking steps to apply. And like I said, sometimes just a $50 food card or a $50 rent reduction is an extra motivator to get people to apply. Let's see. Any other questions before we sign off? We will be posting, do we have, yes, so we have on the screen at the moment is all the different phone numbers and email addresses that people can reach out to. As I said, there's also a one-pager that we will post that's also on our website. That's in 5 different languages that tell people how to access these programs. During business hours, we answer our phones with a live person, but we are also at times inundated with phone calls. So at times people do have to leave messages. We try our best to answer within 24 hours any messages left. We, you know, we even in the non-pandemic times, we believe in with real voice answering. You will find that our general office phone number is a recording that also gives all of these same email addresses and phone numbers, as these are the numbers that are answered by live people. Is there a backlog in scheduling? That someone again asked, is there a backlog in scheduling on the online portal? And yes, there is a backlog in scheduling, but it's not done 2 weeks at a time. You know, again, I don't know how the DMV works, but the portal is updated on a regular basis. There's no special strategy that I can provide. With that, I do want to thank everybody for taking the time. I do again want to encourage you to partner with your tenants in helping them to apply for these programs. We have those various websites where we can answer more specific questions. One hint is info@housingetc.org actually goes directly to me. So if you have any specific questions, that's an easy email address. If you can't remember how to spell my name directly, to get to me directly, I try and either, I pass them around to staff to answer where appropriate. But if it's something that's bigger question, I will answer directly myself. I do want to thank CNHED for all of their work in putting this together, and as well in supporting advocates and supporting tenants and supporting developers and property owners, as again, we are all in this together. I want to also thank the council and the mayor for putting together programs, and their program directors and operations staff for putting together programs very quickly that really did have really good impact in this really terrible situation that we're all trying to navigate. I think that the city is doing a good job at accessing federal funds where possible. We want to therefore make sure these funds are well used or used properly so that the city can continue to access funds to support tenants and property owners as this crazy world continues. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you. Thank you, Marian, Oscar, Susan, Julian. Thank you so much for today's presentation. I'll just be brief, just to remind folks, you don't have to worry. We will definitely provide the entire slide deck, today's recording, all links to applications and checklists, all flyers provided. We will make a nice resource package for you and email everyone who registered and those who attended today. So you'll have that information hopefully before the Thanksgiving holiday this weekend. And again, we just thank you and hope you stay safe and healthy.